Hello, welcome. My name is Manuel from Kata Studios. Today we are going to be doing our first introduction to Photoshop. Okay, so here I'm going to teach you every little thing I do right from after the installation to the final process as a beginner. Okay, so you are going to be learning the basic things, the tips, the tricks, the guides, and every of the settings you need to know in using this application and going forward. Are you ready? Let's get right into it. So the first thing I do, whenever you install Photoshop in your PC, you may not find the application in your desktop. So you need to click on the Start button at the bottom left corner, okay, over here. Then you are going to find the Photoshop application. So when you click on it, it opens, and I'm going to talk about that in a little while. But what I want to teach you here is to keep this particular app stable so that next time you want to use it, you don't need to start searching for it in these layouts. Okay, so it stays in the task bar, which is this is called the task bar. And this task bar holds this application for a limited period of time, the period which you'll be using it. As soon as you close this application disappears from here, and you need to get back to this particular area to find it again. So to avoid that, what you need to do is to pin this application. To pin it, once it is here, click Option and pin to taskbar. So in so doing, the next time, for instance, this application, when I close it down now, watch what happens when I close it down. I close it down and it is still there. If I need it again, I click on it, it poops up, and I proceed or continue from where I stopped. So this is very important. It stays right in the taskbar so that next time I want to use it, I don't need to start going through all those three triggers. So that's the first thing. The next very important thing is to change the theme of my designer. Now this is very simple to do. If you want to change the theme of your designer, head over to Edit at the top area, scroll down until you find the preferences, and scroll up till you find the interface. You can also find out from general. If you click on general, you can still find interface, but let's just get right into it. So when we click on interface, we are going to be faced with this. If you are in general, you're going to find something like this. So what you need to do is just to click on the interface area. So here you can choose whether you want it to be a little more grayish or brighter grayish. You get the point. I wonder who will need this 90s theme style for Photoshop. So this is the default it comes with, and I would like to switch with a more darker theme or interface, and you see how the whole place is more organized. So that's the first thing I do as long as I launch into Photoshop. Now when you get into Photoshop, you see the layouts like something like this. Okay, so you need to start creating your new artboard. You can possibly click on new file, then you can create a new file from the one available, or pick a particular file availability from here. You can pick from the web, from the print. If you want to print design an A4, you can hit on the A4 variables from here. But make sure whenever you are designing, whether in Photoshop or Illustrator, change the color mode to RGB. Make sure you're not using CMYK, because most use cases of prints are CMYK colors, and those colors are not usually for presentation, they are for prints. So you can also create your own artboard by just getting in, selecting a particular width. The least width I will suggest you select in pixels. This might be in inches. So next thing you need to do is click on this, click on pixels. The least width the least pixel you should select is 2000. So you can create 2500 width times 3000 height, which means the height is going to be taller than the width. Okay, it's going to be wider than the width. So let's create that and see. As you can see, so let's create another artboard. If in case we want the height to be the width, like we want to switch this, what we need to do is very simple. Just hit on this particular orientation format. And when you hit on that, it automatically reverses this. So when we just click, we still leave it at 2000. Watch what happened. The numbers switches each time we click on that orientation. You get what happens? So now when we click on create, automatically that converts to a horizontal artboard layout. Now we're going to try one more thing. This is in pixel. You can switch to inches if you want to know what particular size that particular pixel amount or quantity is in inches. This centimeter, this millimeter, this point, and this picas. I don't even wonder who uses this anymore. So here is where you can rename your artboard. You can call this flyer design. I know designers don't even do this. Okay, you can call it flyer design. This is the name that you will find at the top of this particular layout. Let me zoom very more closely. See all these things as you're like seeing smartphone 14, though you can still rename this after you're done, but it's best practice you do this from here. Okay, here is where you change the colors, the byte rate, leave it as it is. The background color, you can switch this to black or white. You understand what it's talking about, the artboard background color. You can do that from here. Can leave it as so, leave all these other ones as it is, so we can proceed to creating our new layout. So we assume we select black and we can start making our design. So Photoshop, you don't need to create a particular artboard size that is not equal to what you want to design. So for instance, we want to design something like this with this size, and you see we want to design something in a square, but the problem now we're having extra layout here because the size in width of this is 2500. Okay, so what we need to do here is to select on this particular element. I'm going to talk about this in a little while. Select on this element. Usually this is usually in ratio and everything is cleared. So usually like this, and this one is like this. I'm going to talk about these tools one after the other in the future, okay? So don't bother about that. So you can reduce this size to this and then reduce this other size to this, and you hit enter, automatically it have reduced the size of that particular layout. So whenever we delete this image here, we still see our white background. You get that point? So now let me teach you one more thing that you need to understand about sizing or size calculation in Photoshop. So for instance, we take this size to be 2000 times 2000. This is a perfect square. Okay, now we create. Watch what happens. We drag in the same image which we used before. It covers the same space. Okay, now watch what happens when we create 4000 times 4000. So we're going to create 4000 times 4000. Okay, cool. Now we still drag in the same image. Let's drag in the same image. We have the image still maintaining the same square, though it's not the same width. But now, if we drag this to the edge and drag this other one down here, we still have the same size. So which means whatever size you're using doesn't have much to do with the aspect ratio. It have more to do with the resolution. We're going to talk about aspect ratios and resolutions in the future. But for now, understand that if you're creating a square size, whether it's 1000 times 1000, is the same with any square image you are dropping inside. Even if it is 5000 times 5000. All you need to do is to resize it to whatever size you want. So since we have understand that, let's proceed with next. If you are done with a particular layout, you want to clear it out, just see this X button at the top right corner, click on that and you click. You don't want to save it. We still do the same thing with this one. We don't want to save it, and we can still do the same thing with this one. We don't want to save it. I wouldn't advise you to have a lot of this over here so that your works can be organized. You can do like 3 or 4 jobs processes. So the rest of them, you can save them as PSD, which I'm going to show you in a little while so that I can reuse them in the future. Okay. Why you do this is so that your PC won't lag. Your PC will slow down if you have too many content here, because all of those contents cache and logs will be saved in your PC processing system. So now let me show you how to save this particular work. We are going to save this work so that we are going to open this work again. We're going to save this work, then we delete it from here, then we open it again so we can continue from where we stopped. So what I'm going to show you now, we have actually learned how to create a new artboard and add elements in it. So I'm going to teach you how we can save a particular process of work. Maybe we are done with the work, we are not done with a particular part of it. We want to continue maybe tomorrow or next tomorrow, and we don't want to come tomorrow and someone have switched off our PC, or we can't get our job recovered, though Photoshop recover jobs to some extent. But to avoid issues, you need to save your work as a file so that it can continue from where it stopped the next day or the next time you want to work. So to do this, what we need to do is to hit on the Control, Alternative, and S. Not only Control S. Control S saves the work with minimal format availability. We're going to still talk about this in the future. So we can now save this as Cell Anything or Cell Any. Then we save it as PSD. Make sure it's as PSD. Then select the desktop to save as. Then we click on Save. We click on OK and we have the work saved. So now let's delete this mistakenly. We say we don't want to save this and we deleted it. Now we come back here. All you need to do is this file. Make sure you save your files in folders. This file, we just have to double click on it and it will open Photoshop and open the file. So everything right inside it, we still have access to all of it. And for instance, we have this file and we have a friend somewhere who wants to continue this particular project. You don't want to continue the project maybe because you are busy or sick or something like that, and you want to send this file to a friend. Make sure you send the fonts you used for this particular project to the friend, because if your friend don't have the same font in this particular project, the font will disappear and appear. What you will find is just very ugly default font that comes with this, and that's not what you want. You want a friend to also maintain this. So what do you do? How do you export this font to your friend? What you do is select on the font, just click on the font you want to use, then click on this text icon. If you don't click on it, you're not going to find the font name. Then from here, you're going to find the font name. You see the font name, Sovar. So let's search for control panel. Okay, click on control panel. So from here, we can find the fonts from this particular search area. So type font. Okay, now here you can see preview, delete, or show hidden fonts. So click on that. Okay, so we have all the fonts that we needed. So all you need to do is to go back to Photoshop and find the font name which you want to send to your friend. You possibly need to copy it, or if you know the spelling, you can pop it in. So we have the fonts here. We can now drag it out to the desktop. Very simple. We have the font in the desktop. Now we can forward the font to our friend in WhatsApp or whichever a particular platform we use. Okay, so we drag this and we pop it in here and we send the file. So for them to install the font is very simple. All they need to do is to do the same thing, then drag in the font to that particular layout. Do the same thing and then drag it in, or double click on the font. Okay, click on install, then click on yes. Now where you just drag in these fonts, where you do the drag and drop if you want to install fonts is if you have multiple fonts. For instance, we have about 900 fonts to install. To click each and every one of them one after the other to install is a long and rigorous process. All you need to do is to select all the fonts and drag them into this font folder, which I show you how to access, and your font will start installing automatically. In a couple of minutes, it will be done installing. So that's the thing, how to deal with that particular one. So one other thing I need to show you is the first layout setup for our elements panel. I call this the element panel. Okay, you can call it the tool bar, where you find all your tools. Okay, so one thing I usually do is I get over to the top right corner, click on this, and make sure I select on photography. This is my favorite. I have many reasons for that. So when we select on photography, we see that the layout changes. You can also click on this tiny arrow by this side to bring out this and make it in a double fold. Making it double fold makes it easy. Some people like it to be singular, some people like it to be horizontal in 2 columns. So we can possibly delete this. We don't need this. So close the tab for the group and close this other tab. We don't need this. All we need is the layout. We don't even need the channel. We can close the channel unless you are editing more of images. Okay, so what I need here is the layout. I need the typography. So let's find the typography. Click on text and we find typography. You can hit on this particular element from here. Click on it. You see typography is out. Then you can drag it into that particular area. You see how I did that? So if you get any particular element you want to use, to find more elements, go to Windows. Click on Windows over here. You're going to find all elements, the colors, the clone source, the graph, the whatever. All of them are in here. All of them are here. Click on styles. You find the styles panel from here. You get the point. So all these things, you can find them from that particular area. Anyone you don't want from here, from this particular angle, click option and close. Don't close tab. If you close tab, you're going to close all your layouts. So close, it closes that one. We don't want the part, click option and close. So we now have the layouts and we have the character, which is the basic thing I need for my graphic design projects. So I need the layouts where I can organize my layouts and hide things and unhide things. And I need the character where I can also organize my typography. Okay, now if you want to remove or add more elements to this particular one, what you need to do is to get to these 3 dots at this point, click option and edit toolbar. Click on edit toolbar. Then from here, you're going to see more options of available tools that you can add. These are tools that are available in toolbar. These are the extras, the one you can add, and these are the ones that are available now. So you want to add new tool in this particular area. Watch what happens here. If you look at the first element, we have the move tool and we have the artboard tool. The move tool and the artboard tool is this particular one. When you right click on a particular tool that have a tiny arrow down at the particular box, it means there is another tool or more other tools inside. So when we right click, we are going to see the second tool from there. So we have the move tool and we have the artboard tool. So let's get back here and click on edit toolbar. So we see in the first layout we have the move tool and the artboard tool, which is this particular one, only this one. So we want to add another one inside of that particular layer, another one. So maybe you want to add the red eye tool, drag it and put, whether you want to put it in the middle, you drop it there. You see, it stays there. If you want it to be the first, which is the first icon you see that represents all the rest of the icon in that particular drop down, drag it to the top side and it's going to replace that particular icon as soon as you click done. Okay, so usually you can just put it wherever you want. And when you click on done, you can see more other options from here. Scrolling here, you're going to see all other layouts. You can then decide which one is going to be in which area you want it to be. So click on done, then we click on right click and we see we have the red eye tool right there. Now, if you want to move an element, you just need to drag it. Let's just start from the first design. Just have a little design from here. Now, we have this design here and we have another one at the back. We have two layouts, okay? And this layout, this is the first one and this one is the second one. And by the way, this particular area is the layer panel. Layer panel controls all elements in your design. Every singular element in the design is in the layer panel. As we are adding, more is adding here. If we add another thing, more we add. For instance, this particular image we have here at the back, select on it, and let's expose that image is hiding. So this particular image we have from here, you see it's from there. When we hide it, it disappears. You just can hide it with the eye tool. Clicking on the eye tool, you can hide it, or you can select on it and delete it. Just hit on the delete button in your keyboard or hit on the delete at the bottom part and boom, it's gone. Okay, so now we have this particular one at the first and we have the one at the second, which means we first of all have this element before we have this other element. If we have an element in Photoshop and we drag in another element in our Photoshop, as long as we selected a particular element, the next element we are dragging in will stay at the top of that particular element. For instance, we drag in this element. Watch what happens from here. Just watch closely here. It stays at the top of that element, first element we selected, okay? But it stays beneath the other element at the top. If we want it to come at the top of this other element, all we need to do is to drag it from here, from this element panel, drag it up. Very simple. Just drag it and put it at the top. And that is it. You want it to keep going up, drag it up. You want it to keep going up, drag it up. And you understand what's going on there. You want to hide it for the meantime, then you want to continue later, can unhide it from here. Now, one very important problem most people face when they start designing is this. They select an element, they won't see these boxes that have these squares, these tiny squares at the edge, because these tiny squares are responsible for expanding or reducing the size of an element. Very important element in design. So if you don't find that, what you need to do is to make sure you click on show transform control. This is very important. If you don't find it, let me know. If you don't find it, make sure you find it and make sure it is available. Usually you find it whenever you select on the photography. So show transform control, enable that. If you don't enable it, for instance, we disable it, whenever we select an image, we won't see that box to, expand or reduce the size of the image, which will make the structure even more difficult for us to control. So when you enable it, we can now select and expand and control as we want to. Okay? Now there is something I call locking. Locking an element control means you want to actually move it around without it altering the other element at the back. Now, what does this mean? Now, watch, for instance, let me put this element at the back. Let me show you a very core example of what I'm saying. Very good. So now we have that particular other element at the back of this element. You see it's at the back of that particular element. Now, let me show you an example of what I mean. So if we have that element, but we want to move the element at the back, okay, we can't move it. We are only moving the one at the top. You get the idea? We are only moving the one at the top. Now, for instance, we select the one at the back and we want to move it. Now, let's try to move it. Let's try to move it. You see, we can't move it. Why can't we move it? Because we have another element at top that is what overriding the property to select. It is not giving this cursor an opportunity to select and move that element. Though we have selected it from the layout panel, but we can't move it. Now, this is where locking comes in handy. You need to click on the edge of that particular element, because if you try to move again, you're going to move the other one. Okay, so once we select on the element we want to move, click to lock it. Once it is locked, as you can see, we now find a cross boundary sign in that particular element. Now when we try to move it, we can now move it without having issues. We can move it anytime without having issues with the other one. Okay, but if we try this again, as we have clicked outside and want to try it again, we won't be able to do that. Okay, so that is what locking. You lock your element whenever you want to proceed with another element at the other part. For instance, you are dealing with elements with multiple layouts, a lot of multiple layers. For instance, this one over here, maybe I want to move it and I try to move it and I find out that mistakenly I am moving the image by the background. You see, I selected it, but when I wanted to move it, I find out I'm moving the image. So what you need to do is select on the element, click to lock it. Anywhere you drag, it goes with you. I hope you get the point now. Very good. So now another thing I want to teach you is how to undo and redo. For instance, we have an element from here. We scattered all our elements. Push this one here, push this other one here, push this other one here. We made a mistake. Let me take that particular one as an instance. And we want to go back. All you need to do in your keyboard is click on Control and Z. Control Z, it goes one step backward. Control Z again, one step backward, again and again and again and again. If we want to go forward again, what we need to do is to hold Control and Shift and Z. Z, 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 Z. So we made a mistake and we corrected it, and we want to go back to the mistake again. Hold on Control, Shift and Z. But you want to redo the mistake, you hold on Control, Z, 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 Z and Z. We are good to go. Okay, so from the layer panel, we can hide an element from here. For instance, we want to hide this image. We click on the eye option from here to hide it. I talked about that previously before now. Okay, and we cannot hide it. We want to apply some properties, not the black and white. We want to make some changes to this image. For instance, we want to add this particular border around it, or want to add a little shadow to that particular image. What we need to do is to click on an empty side twice, or click option and scroll down till you find blending option. Scroll up till you find this blending option, click on it, and we have this option from here. You see the inner stroke. If we remove it, the inner stroke is gone. From the inner stroke, you can then select the size of the inner stroke you want. You see it, but make sure you take it easy with your inner stroke. Okay, now you can reduce the opacity to whatever minimal size you want. You can increase it to be very bright. It's all up to you. Then this is the drop shadow. You can enable that if you want to, and the rest of the things. You can just play around with the rest of the things. You can find your outer layout, outer glow. You can add an outer glow. If you select an option, it doesn't just start applying that style in that particular option. You need to click on the pattern itself. You need to click on the element itself. So clicking on an element will enable it and also select that option for you to play around with. But clicking on the checkbox will only enable that particular element, but won't give you the opportunity or the menu to style that particular element style. So when we click on this, we have to click on the element itself. So from here, we can now select any pattern we want to use. Whatever pattern, we can also import our own pattern, and then let's go to the next image and see if we can do something from here. Okay, now this is very important, shadows. Okay, shadows is very important in most designs. So we're going to delete these shadows and create a new shadows. So this is how to create shadows as a beginner. What you need to do is to click on the element you want the shadow to be above, not the element you don't want it to be above. If we create a shadow above this text, it won't make any sense. Now, why do we create shadows? We create shadows because we want it to highlight text in a more formal format. We want it to show this text format in a way people can understand or read without the image in the background conflicting. So shadows are invariably called overlays. Overlays are kind of elements used in showing contrast between two different or two diverse elements. So to create this particular shadow, remember I talked about layouts, talked about the one at the top and the one at the bottom. If you create a shadow at the top, let me show you what it means. Create a shadow like this at the top, it's going to cover the text. You see, you can't see the contact detail and all of that. That's not what we want. So we delete the shadow again. Now there's a very little trick I'm going to teach you in shadow making. So watch very carefully. So we're going to select on the image we want to create shadow on. The next thing we need to do is to create a new layout. You know, you can create a new layout. I never talked about that. Very quickly, you can create a new layout by clicking on this create new layout. That new layout is not a new artboard. New artboard is one we created by clicking on Control and N in our keyboard and creating a new artboard like this. But that's not new layout. A new layout follows the size of the artboard you created. Let me repeat. A new layout follows the aspect ratio of the artboard you created, not the resolution. Okay, the aspect ratio, which means the top, the left, the size left and right, and the size up and down. It follows all of those rules. So we're going to create a new layout with this particular image here. So click on the image. We want that particular layout to be above it. Remember, it's an overlay above this particular image. So click on that and we create a new layout by clicking on that particular element from here. So now we have to brush a particular color above that layout. Creating that layout doesn't actually give it the color we want, except we want to paint a black color over it. And to do that, click till you find this option called the Paint Bucket tool. And by the way, if you don't want to edit and add more elements from here, you can right click and then see the rest of the options available. Then you can select from there. The Paint Bucket tools helps you to paint colors. So for instance, we select on this and we select orange color. Remember, first thing we need to do is to add a new layout. Second thing, we select the Paint Bucket tool. Third thing, we select on a color from here. We select a particular color we want from here. Select orange color. And then next thing, we can paint on that particular layout. Mind you, we are only painting on the layout we just created. If we unhide that, we don't find what we just created. Okay? It only applies to the layout. It doesn't apply to the whole system or the whole design we just made. So it applies to that new layout which you just created. I just show you an instance. So we're going to go back and we're going to do that again. So if you do this for black, select and we select on black, it's going to apply black. But what we want to do here is not to apply the color all around. What we want to use is this second option that applies this color in some parts of the layout. So the brush tool is responsible for applying colors in some areas. Now, but there are a few settings we need to apply before we proceed. Number one, we need to select on this particular top panel. Okay, click on this little arrow around this particular circle, click on the drop down, click on the general arrow and select on the soft rounded brush. This soft rounded brush will make it easy for us to, brush without having a specific edge to our brush. Let me show you what that means. Here we can increase the size of our brush by scrubbing on this particular scrub bar. So we select on a size that we want. Whatever size we're selecting, it will manipulate. So if we are using this one that is hard edge, when we brush, you see that we have this hard tiny edge that we don't want. We don't want that. We want the edges to be soft. So we select on the soft area. When we use the soft area, you see that we have soft edges. Very good. So now let's do our work. So we have to Control Z, scroll down. Don't be afraid to make any mistake. Remember, we place this above the image. That's why anything we do above the image will affect the image. But we want some part of the image to show and some part of the image to be the overlay. Okay? So what we need to do here is let's zoom out a little. To zoom out, hold on Control and minus in your keyboard. Control minus, Control plus is zoom in. Okay? Zoom out, Control minus. So now we are there. We can scrabble at the bottom parts just softly once. Okay, now let me show you something else you can do. When we look very closely at the top side, we see what we call opacity and we see the flow. Forget about the flow. We are going to talk about this later when you are doing image editing. Opacity, we may need to reduce the opacity to whatever opacity size you want. Now watch what opacity does to our image, our styling. You see it makes this a little bit fainted. Okay, it doesn't make it to be that much harsh. Why I like this particular one against using the harsh one is we can apply this style as many times and also affect it in many edges, okay, of our design. But this is not what I want to show you. For instance, we use that particular other format. That's one that have a very high opacity and we brush down to a certain area. Let's increase the size of this and we brush down to this certain area. And we brush down to this certain area again. Now, what I want to show you here is very quick is this. This is what people don't know when they are using shadows like this for overlay. You don't just brush shadows and just leave it like this. It doesn't work. It doesn't make the work look very neat and very nice. To do that, make it look very nice like the one I showed you previously. Select on the element itself, then expand it. Okay, when you expand it, then drag it up until you're satisfied with the area that you want the shadow to show. You can further expand it again, then drop it a little more, then expand it again. Let's drop it a little more. You see, we have that effect. We can now reduce it a little. We have that effect that people don't know exactly where that particular shadow or that particular overlay is coming from. It's very easy for people to see stuffs in the background, but still see the content at the top. You get that trick? So this is the trick people don't know when they are creating shadows. You create shadows, you just place all elements and just make the whole thing like this. If you make the whole thing like this, people are not going to see the content at the background, and it doesn't make sense. And another way you can do this is select on the element and reduce the opacity from here. You can reduce all element opacity from this area. Okay? So you reduce opacity from this particular area. You can reduce it further. Okay? Whatever size you reduce it, it is going to correspond respectively. Okay, so we are done with that. We have to move into the next one. Let's try the next design tool. So for instance, this particular one over here, to move around elements, you know how to do that. To add a shadow over an element, you see these elements have a shadow over here. So to add a shadow, double click on this. I told you about that, right clicking and selecting on the layer style. Click on drop shadow, and from drop shadow you can select a particular color. Watch what happens to that particular element at the bottom part. And to apply a shadow, you must have to put it must be a bright color beneath the element you're applying the shadow on, else your shadow doesn't just work. So when you increase the opacity of the shadow, you see what happens to that particular shadow element. So first thing, you click and select the shadow, then you can increase the opacity from there, but that's not all. Okay, so for instance, we selected on this. We can also use our mouse and go over the element we apply that shadow on and drag it around. This is another trick I want to teach you. So dragging it around, like keeping it in a particular area where we want it to actually base. Usually make sure your shadows are bottom based. Don't make your shadow to be at the top. You're not going to notice anything. Bottom base, where it can flow like a shadow as though light is casting from the top corner. So we can now reduce the opacity to whatever size we want, and we can increase the distance. You can spread it a little if you want it to scatter a little. Just play around with what you have from here. Add noise if you want it to have noise and all of that. So that's how to add shadows from Photoshop, and that's the basic thing we need from there. The next thing, let's get to the next one. We are going to add this very tiny line at the edge of this particular element. So this one, we are going to remove the style from there, and we are going to create it anew. Okay, so what you need to do from there, if you want to add that tiny line, like giving it a little bit of aesthetics, what you need to do is to click on the stroke, select on the stroke, and from the stroke we can select whatever color we want. So what you select black, it is black. We select red, it is red. If we select green, it is green. You can actually pull up color from here. Just select whatever color you want from here. And if you select on this S, you are selecting a particular color style variables. Okay, select on this, you are selecting a particular different color style variable. Select on this, you understand the trick. It depends on how you want to play around with your color styling. It's all up to you. Okay, so for instance, we are using this. We want to use a very bright area of white. Just go to the edge, increase this a little more. We go to the edge like so. And I think that's what's close to what we want. Okay, and that is it. How to add a stroke. Select on this. We can increase or decrease the stroke thickness. We can reduce the stroke thickness. Okay, but just keep it at a minimal so that it will have that cool aesthetics. Okay, you can decide to set it inside or outside or in the center of the elements. Okay, blend mode, you can place it whatever. Opacity, you can reduce the opacity. If you can increase it, depends on what you are looking at. And whenever you are doing your design, make sure you also can zoom out from here to see how it looks, and also zoom in and proceed with your work. I find some people do zoom out and zoom in with this particular element over here. I never use this to zoom my work. Usually I only use it a couple of times to test what it feels like, but I find it a little bit buggy. Sometimes I try it, it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Let's move on. So the next thing is, whenever you want to select an element and you are in another element, you must have to select this element too. You must have to select this one. They call it the move tool. You must have to select on it to select other elements. So once we select on it, we can then move around elements from wherever we want to move them around. Okay, and see if we have anything going on there. We don't have anything. We've talked about shadows. We've talked about elements like this. Let's go to the next one. And we also have talked about this overlaying element. So this element is a different element. Okay, this one is at the back side, and this one is next to it, and this one is next to it. That's what gave it that illusion to seem as if this particular one is over there. Then in this one that is in the front, we added a shadow and put the shadow at the top, so that the shadow will reflect on that circle at the top, so that we get that particular effect from there. So that's how we got that effect, and that is basically it. Any other thing? Let's see the next one we can do. This one we talked about shadows. Shadows is responsible for casting all these elements. This one we are going to create it when we come. We talked about shadows from here too. We're going to create this one when we come to Illustrator. Then the next one, we've talked about this shadows also. So it's just like basically everything is everything in Photoshop. Everything, okay, is almost the same thing. Play around with what you have. You don't need to be scared of anything. Top side. Oh, very importantly, let's talk about very one quick thing. Okay, whenever you have these particular lines around, these particular dash lines around, you can click on Control D to deselect. What that means is deselecting that element. Next thing we need to do now is to learn how to remove an image from a background. So this image we have over here is have the background, but this one doesn't have the background. That's why we create the illusion as though this particular circles at the back of the lady's hair is actually our brown style, and our brown style is going with the design we made. So let's learn quickly how to remove the background from an image. So we delete this one, and we hide this, and we hide it. Okay, so we have this image from here. So what we need to do is duplicate this image. To duplicate image in Photoshop, hold on Control and J. Control J duplicates image. Watch this area. Put your eyes over here while I Control J. Okay? Control J, you see the image duplicates. It's now double. So since the image is double, we have one at the top and one at the bottom. To know this, you can drag around the image to see that. Okay? So now, one thing we need to do here is very simple. The first one, we can hide the second image at the bottom part. Select on the first image, click on select, then click on subjects. Okay, then in subject, that's all you need to do. It's going to select, once you're selecting on that image, it's going to do its AI work and separate the image from the background. Now automatically it has separated the image from the background. What we need to do now is to click on Ctrl J to separate the image from that layout, which means we want to have the image separate. Watch what happened when I click on Ctrl J. We have selected it. I have now pre-selected the area we want to select, which is the subject. If we click on object, we mean we want to select the background itself. So we click on Ctrl J to separate that image. We have separated it. Look at what happened here. We now have another image here. So when we hide this one, we have an image that is in an empty background. And mind you, whenever you want to do this, make sure the image is very well centered. As you can see, the lady's hair is cut because the image was like this when we separated it. It's only separate what it can see. And the lady's hand is being cut out because the image was like this when we started doing it. Okay, we practically have the image like this. So now, sorry about that, lady. So now we have that image from there. We can now add our elements from here. Then push that element to the back or drag that image to the front of that element. You understand what we did here? We've talked about this previously. Drag it above the IC. We have that style. Now what we need to do now is to enable the image at the back of everything. And it will now match with the one we have here. Just make sure every image is matched with the other one. Very simple and straightforward, isn't it? Very good. So that is how to separate image from background and still maintain the aesthetics. Okay, so we've talked about a lot here. The rest of the things are basic things that we might be touching as soon as we get into usage of some tools in Photoshop. Okay, to download Photoshop, you can get that in photoshop.com. You can purchase the Photoshop license for a year or for a couple of months, or you ask some of your graphic designer friends how they got this, and they're going to guide you. Don't chat me to ask me how you get Photoshop. Okay, sorry about that. So now the next thing we are going to do is to learn how to save our work. So for instance, we are done with this work. Let's try to save our work. To save our work, hold on Control, Alternative, and S. Automatically, we're going to see this particular option. Okay, option, and we want to save this work as an image. Remember the first one, we saved it as a PSD, okay, which is the file document for Photoshop. So we want to select on this and click on JPG, okay, then we save it with whatever name. Usually designers save with rubbish names. So if you want to save it with a responsible name, if you are responsible, you save it with a responsible name. Responsible designers save responsible names. And if you hit on save, you are good to go. Once we hit on save, since it's rest, then we can select on the resolution style we want from here. Make sure your image is not above 1 megabyte. If you're using this on social media, make sure it's not above 1 megabyte. But if you're using it for print, you can leave it at 2 megabytes, 3 megabytes. If it's an image, if it's PDF, it's automatically saved on a default size. So 700 kilobytes, 500 kilobytes, it's okay. You can reduce it a little here, but keep it at high if it is within 700 kilobytes. If you can't see these digit numbers, make sure this is enabled. Preview the size is enabled. Leave it at baseline standard and we hit on OK. So cool, our design is now ready. Double click and we can find our image available for what we need it for. So that is it, guys, on how to use the basic tools in Photoshop, or the basic setup you need to know about Photoshop. These are very simple things and straightforward. I'll meet you in the next one.